Well, good morning, everybody. This is Glenn. I can't include Adrian yet because he's in another state and we need to figure out how we're going to bring him on board. It looks like I'm going to have to get some live stream software to do that. So I decided to go live this morning because today's upcoming video was blocked in all territories. Pretty good record there. It was going to be our reaction to 10 years after at Woodstock playing I'm Going Home. So just so you know, we had it all ready to go and it's not happening. So I figured, well, I can't just leave you with nothing. And lately in the news, we've had the guy that actually started or co-founded Rolling Stone, the magazine, removed from his own board of directors, which is something that many of our music fans have hoped for many years now, because he is perceived to have gotten into the way of getting a lot of um, artists that very much belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and keeping them out. For example, Rush had to wait, I think, an extra 13 years between the time that they got started, that means that they were actually eligible to go into the Hall of Fame, and when they actually did, finally, due to fan demand. It just got overwhelming. So, anyway, I've never been a huge fan of Jann Wenner. Uh, he has been removed from that board of directors because of some comments he made in a Times article. He's out there doing publicity for a book that he just wrote called The Masters. He did interviews, well, really over time. He's got interviews with several different icons in rock and roll, which, okay, you might expect that. But they're all white and they're all male. And that's that. We've got Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Bruce Springsteen, Pete Townsend, and Bono from U2. All very worthwhile artists, but all white males. So he was asked about this. Asked why he didn't interview women or black musicians, Wenner responded, "It's not that they're inarticulate, although go have a deep conversation with Grace Slick or Janis Joplin. Please be my guest," he says. "You know, Joni Mitchell was not a philosopher of rock and roll." Oh, would we like to go through and see what else has made its way into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame over the years that had nothing to do with rock and roll? And worthwhile artists. For example, Miles Davis, I believe, is in there, um, largely on the strength of that 1959 album, Kind of Blue, which helped um, influence the Allman Brothers, among other people. It's a fantastic album. Is Miles Davis rock and roll? Yeah, I don't think so. Progenitor? Yeah, probably. So, what else did he say? Uh, oh, yeah. You know, Joni Mitchell was not a philosopher of rock and roll. She didn't, in my mind, meet that test, he told him. Okay. Okay, John. And then he says, of black artists, you know, Stevie Wonder, genius, right? Also one of the best known people of all time. I suppose when you use a word as broad as masters, the fault is using that word. Maybe Marvin Gaye or Curtis Mayfield. I mean, they just didn't articulate at that level, Wenner said. Yeah, so that's why they removed him. Now, apparently, he's issued an apology through his publisher, saying, in my interview with the New York Times, I made comments that diminished the contributions, genius, and impact of Black and women artists, and I apologize wholeheartedly for those remarks. Well, and then he added, I totally understand the inflammatory nature and badly chosen words. Yeah, and deeply apologize and accept the consequences. But yeah, he co-founded the magazine Rolling Stone in 1967, and then he went on to co-found the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I think has been kind of an issue. It's made it something that it's really not. There are a lot of great artists in there, but I don't think it really looks the way most people would regard a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to look like. And again, I'm not disparaging anybody, but folks like Miles Davis, who I love, by the way, I mean, we need a jazz Hall of Fame and maybe just an overall music Hall of Fame. We'll throw some people in there like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington. Um, but, if we're going to go with genres, it seems to me we should stick with rock and roll, and it should be everybody, or not just rock and roll, perhaps, but everything that contributed to that melting pot that made for the rock and roll songs, especially in the 60s and the 70s. And that's really where Wenner comes from. But as we know, music has marched on along with time, and there's been a lot of good artists that have come up even in the 80s, even in the 90s, even in the 2000s. We still have good artists out there today. They're just not quite as visible because it's a much bigger pond of musicians than it used to be. It used to be that the labels would act as the gatekeepers and kind of filter out a lot of music, actually, including some deserving music, but, bad with the good. So I recall when Rolling Stone first put together something that eventually became their 500 greatest albums of all time list. Now, as I recall, this was the late 80s or maybe 1990s, somewhere in there. And they put it out in print. I remember going through it and finding artists that I loved afterwards. It was actually a great way to learn about a lot of artists that I knew I was going to like, but nobody had ever told me about. So at the time, I recall Sergeant Pepper was at the top of the list. I think it was followed by Pet Sounds, and I know Hendrix's first album was in there. Pretty sure Purple Rain was in there. It definitely should have been by that time. Songs in the Key of Life. I don't recall if that was on there or not, but it definitely should have been. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the thing about that 80s list is that it was pretty much a white male list. At least 90% were white males. The list has changed a lot since then. I think they got a lot of blowback on that over time, and they put out their official 500 greatest albums of all time list in 2003. But trust me, there was a list before that, and it wasn't a particularly diverse list. So the most recent 500 greatest albums of all time list actually has Marvin Gaye's What's Going On at the top, which is a fantastic album. But I can tell you, it was probably, I don't know, it was much further down the list back then. I don't recall. And then they have Blue by Joni Mitchell at number 3, which is pretty good. I absolutely guarantee you there were no Joni Mitchell albums up there anywhere near that rank at the time. Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life at number 4. Okay, yeah, why not? Purple Rain by Prince was at number 8. Is at number 8, excuse me. And they even have Lauryn Hill's Miseducation of Lauryn Hill at number 10. That's kind of an interesting one. That is a great album. I'm not sure if it's number 10 on my list. However, fantastic record, and actually really her only album, as I understand it. Anyway, times have changed, and it seems that Mr. Wenner is a little out of step with the times. Maybe he's always been a little bit. But if you'd like us to do a video on Mr. Wenner and the Rolling Stone history, let us know, and we'll take it up. But I thought this was worth a mention since it really impacts the very world that we often cover here. So I think with that, I'm going to go get some coffee, and I hope you enjoy this replacement video for our 10 years after. It looks like we're probably not going to be able to do that unless we do a Patreon or something one day. I think you can get a free Patreon together. Maybe I'll look into that. See if we can put some of the clips that get blocked up in there, just so they're available somewhere. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to finish my coffee and move on with my day and see what else we can put together for you folks this week. Happy Monday, everybody. We'll catch you soon. Take care.